And thank you for having me, and I appreciate the time. Being here. It's definitely a pleasure. Thank you, man.
You're welcome. Hi again, everyone, and welcome back to the Dr. Z and J Dub podcast presented by Provenzano's Deli and the Charger Athletics Fund. As always, we thank you for joining us across all of our social media channels today. And as always, our podcast is available on iTunes, Spotify, and Google Play. It must be a special day because Dr. Z has his tie on. This might be the first podcast we've done in 2 years where either one of us has worn a tie.
First of all, the pandemic, killed the tie for a while, right?
Yeah.
But there are days when I wear it, but I have time to get changed into something a little more casual, and today wasn't one of those. I do appreciate that you matched up, the color tone with my tie here. It looks like we know what we're doing.
We actually does, believe it or not. I hope we impress our guests today. Our guest is Randall Horton, who is a professor in our English department. He's also the recipient of the prestigious American Book Award. Randall, you have an amazing story. I don't even know where to begin to tell this story. You're the storyteller between the three of us, so I'll let you pick where you want to begin telling your story.
Yeah, it's kind of convoluted and goes all over the place, and many stops and starts and, detours. And, without trying to get too verbose, in a nutshell, I was incarcerated for close to almost 5 years, 4 and some change. But going back, I think I lost my way when I was in college at Howard University, and I kind of sort of fell into another kind of lifestyle that sort of led me down a road that was sort of, this sort of like, that sort of took me through a lot of things in terms of how I lived my life and the things that actually led to incarceration. So I was one of those black men that didn't escape the idea of prison, but also I didn't escape what the drug cocaine did to those of us in the 80s who participated in that thing. And so the two of those combined with me sort of like dropping out of school and sort of choosing another lifestyle. It ended in incarceration. I mean, I think it's an old cliche, right? It's an old cliche, and they tell you that, well, there's only a few ways that you can go. And so, I found myself incarcerated, and I needed to make a change in my life. I was in state prison in Hagerstown, Maryland, and I'd gone through this program that was in Maryland. In Montgomery County, Maryland. It was called Jail Addiction Services. And one of the components of the program was they would come in a couple of times a week, and they would do these group sessions where you had to write down the things that were making you tick in your life. You had to write down the things that were making you tick in your life. And I would go in my cell at night, and I would just sort of try to pour my heart out on the page. And it was something I had never really done before. I had gone to school, and I was sort of getting by. I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I thought I wanted to be a physical therapist at one time and do sports therapy. Then I changed my major to econ, but then I sort of found this other thing that I was sort of got into in terms of the drugs and sort of found my escapism through that. But all of it sort of like, was just things that I was building up over the years and not talking to anybody about. And I think writing sort of provided that outlet, that little one outlet to sort of express myself. So long story short, again, before I go up to the state prison, the lady who runs the program, her name was Bonnie Boswell. She worked at the Department of Health. Well, she still works there, Department of Health and Human Services. And she told me that she didn't want me to stop writing. When she brought me into her office, she said, the one thing I want you to promise me that you don't do, Randall, is stop writing. We're going to try to get you back before the judge, so we can go send you to this program, and so you can have, opportunity to sort of have another life. And we didn't know what was going to happen, right? And so I went up to Montgomery County. I went up to Hagerstown, Maryland, to Roxbury Correctional. I was up there for a couple of years, and they called me back. They call it a motion for reconsideration, Miss Boswell got the motion. And so I came back. I had to go back before the judge, and I had to tell, prove, state this case of why I should have another chance at life, or another, chance of trying to make something of myself in this society. And it was really an intense moment, to be honest with you. It's probably one of the most intense moments that I've ever had. It's for the simple reason that my father had to come there, man. And he came all the way from Birmingham, Alabama, and so he was my long character witness at that point. But it was my father who got up there and sort of, as we sort of like to say, held court in the courtroom. And so, and something that to this day I still try to think about in ways and try to talk about it, because I think it was a really interesting moment in terms of something that changed my life, and understanding how someone who loves you so much and put so much and invested so much into you, you put someone in that position right now to sort of like place everything that he knows about dignity and honor, and to sort of like beg someone to sort of give your child another chance, right? In my mind, I like to say that I was ready. That whatever opportunity I had, I was going to take it and run with it, right? But I think whatever doubt that could have been seeped in my mind, I think that solidified, what my purpose on this planet was. Yeah, I mean, so the other part of it after that happened, I mean, and so you could hear pins drop, man. My lawyer crying, the judge almost crying, I'm crying, I can't say nothing. Stand up and give my ruling, and then she granted my sentence. She granted our request. And so after I went back into the holding cell with the bailiff, the deputy who had brought me out, and he was like, he had saw the whole thing, and he was like. And he sat, and I was sitting in the holding cell by myself, and I was just reflecting. And he said, "Man, look, let me tell you something. I've been sitting with this judge for 30 years. She's never done that. She had never done that. Never given someone a chance like that. This particular judge. Sort of like up until that point, I had been interested in poetry and words and language and literature. And I've been writing. I've been corresponding with a few writers." Who actually became some of my mentors later on. And so when I did go down to North Carolina, I spent 2 years down there preparing for when I would reacclimate myself back into Washington D.C. and finishing getting my degree. And I would go on to get an MFA from Chicago State and then a PhD from SUNY Albany. That's sort of the short version. You got to get memoir 1 and 2 to fill in the holes.
Randall, that was like watching a movie. I got myself kind of pulled in there, and until you broke, that was I got transfixed. I don't know if J-Dub was thinking of questions, but that was. Thank you for being so authentic and sharing that.
Well, that's I tell the story a lot when I go to different places. I mean, until that, I don't talk about I don't really read. There's a piece I wrote about that in my first memoir. I don't read it a lot, but I do tell that story a little bit, especially when I go into juvenile detention centers and I'm talking to young kids about things and about people who love them in some way or another. There's someone out there who loves you, and if not, how can we find someone to love? So how can we make that relationship exist? To be honest, I didn't know I was going to be in higher ed in this capacity. I thought I would be a writer. I kind of thought that. I didn't know how it was going to happen, but I was like, this is something I'm going to do. I mean, I just did. And you have to have, at some point, you have to have a support system. And, obviously my parents were there at that point. And I didn't have the money to go, but they didn't want me to fall back into their life. And I get it, man. And so it was hard for me to ask. It was a hard ask for them to support me right in that moment. But it was also even harder. It was like, I'm going to be a poet, and so, I mean, it's so exactly.
The sample size of what you've accomplished in your life, from incarceration to poet to the American Book Award, which is a huge deal unto itself. Mm-hmm. Then you put in there an MFA and a PhD. I think you're a sample size of one. I'm not sure there's another human on this planet that's accomplished the things you've accomplished.
Yeah. All my life I sort of tried to figure out, what makes the most money for me. And it was the wrong thing for me. I realized that I need to have a passion, and I had never found my passion until this. And so I followed my passion. I did that one thing. And then after I got my Master's of Fine Arts, I went on to get my PhD in Poetry and Poetics from SUNY. And the first year that I was on tenure track at the University of New Haven, I got the National Endowment of the Arts Fellowship in Literature, right? which came with a huge, nice cash, nice support system. So I was able to call my mom. It was like a beautiful moment, man. It's like I called my parents back and said, "I got your money."
Randall, as Dr. Z mentioned, you won the prestigious American Book Award for your book of poetry titled number 289128. What is the significance of that number?
Well, the significance, that was my number in Roxbury Correctional on Hagerstown. And so everything my correspondence, and I think I was working on the manuscript. And I got some stuff from my mom, and she sent me some stuff, and it had some of our old exchanges from when I was incarcerated. And then I was kept looking at it like, oh, wow, this is how she had never seen them. And because I was looking for things that sort of jog, my memory and sort of what I'm writing about. And I was like, every time she had to write, she had to put that number down. And so I wanted to take that number, and sort of flip it a little bit and give it a little, I wanted to have the power of the number now. And I wanted to know that number didn't necessarily define me. I'm going to use it in a way to sort of bring attention to a lot of things. And so hopefully we can have some discussions. And so it becomes really crucial for this book to be framed as 289128, right? It really does.
Website, Randall, it says you are the only tenured full-time professor in the U.S. at a university or college with 7 felony convictions. Hear that, Randall. How does that make you feel?
Like I'm wondering how my mama feels about it. I have to acknowledge that, right? Because it's not, I am. And so when I go into a place, and I learned this, I'm the example. And so when I go into these places, a lot of these times, these kids sometimes they actually think it's sort of like, this sort of it's sort of cool or sort of have lived this sort of life, and now you're doing this and like that. I'm like, no. This is not. No, it's not. So dispel that myth. But it's also trust. Like I can get instant trust from these populations. Sometimes these guys and these women, whoever I'm seeing, because I go into both facilities or even when I'm doing sort of some work in the community or whatever, I can get a sort of trust that's sort of believable instantly, without having to spend a year or two building that trust. Exactly, they can understand. Oh, I know where you've been. I know what you've been through. You're talking my language in a way that these people just haven't. And you're giving it to me in a way that, I haven't gotten it in here, and it's clicking in some kind of way. So I try to, let them understand that it's not this glory thing that I went through. I try to get them to understand that. And then the other part of it, there's no excuses. So I need to let them know I have 7 felonies off the bat. I have 7 felonies, and if you had told me that, I found a way to make it from incarceration to having a PhD, to find a way to get on the tenure track line, and to getting to getting awarded tenure at the social level and the full professor. But more so than that, I was able to find a way to make what I went through mean something in the end. It wasn't for nothing. Like all of that. What I went through even before incarceration, then trying to figure my way. All of that meant something for, when I go inside and talk to these individuals, but it also means something when I go inside and talk to my students in the classroom. And that's when we can have some of the real magic conversations about what they think they know versus what, reality, perception versus reality, right?
What class would you enroll in to have you as the professor?
But also my prison lit class, because I think it's a great chance to sort of have a conversation about what you think you knew about the criminal justice system versus, from my perspective, right? This is what I'm talking about from my perspective only, in terms of like that one-on-one dynamic, and to sort of ask those questions as we're going through the text and the material, as we're looking through, I guess prison writings and, alternatives to incarceration, and we're looking at the whole gamut, and we're sort of talking. And so for me, that class is sort of a think tank.
Yeah.
I don't judge. We don't judge. We don't talk about who, where you are. the difference is actually better because I think we actually, that class has always been magic in the way that we actually are able to come together and talk about things in a way that I think they didn't even consider. Everybody's not going to be a writer. Everybody's not going to appear in the New York Times or get their book published, and that's okay. But the bigger thing is how can how can you get your mind to think more creatively about things through language? And once you open that up, I think you're going to be successful in life. I think because you can imagine it, right? You can't create it unless you can imagine it.
Randall, before we let you go and before we wrap up the podcast, please read us one of your poems.
289128, Property of the State. Rhetorical, perhaps. We do not experience movement, the cell, the setting, a chronic theme. We do not experience, only exist. In the frame behind the cell we stand. Each step in place with the next still. Standing, we do not move until told. This instant, we only have moments, mementos relived in slow motion. A cinematic dream, I see you, the good, while we evildoers rot like pomegranate, one sweet, fresh, and vibrant. Rehabilitation is love letters to a ghost. Discourse in the day room, we look at the world to see ourselves on TV inside a constructed frame until told we enter as if we never left.
I don't know.
I don't know how we can top that.
Yeah, it's kind of a mic drop there.
Yeah.
We're lucky to have Dr. Horton.
Thank you very much for being with us, Randall. We really, really appreciate it. That was awesome. Maybe one of the best interviews, maybe the best interview we've ever done. That's Randall Horton. I think at some point his story needs to be made into a movie.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I don't know who can play Randall except for Randall myself.
Wow. So, this one motivates me to go find more stories, and sorry to the folks who think it's simply about athletics here on the Dr. Z and J-Dub podcast. Never has been, never will be, but this was a special day.
We run the gamut here, certainly, and we have a lot of amazing stories here on our campus. We've only just begun to tell them here on the Dr. Z and J-Dub podcast. We couldn't do it without our producer, Broccoli Rob Thompson, our executive producer, John Mays, certainly from Provenzano's Deli and the Charger Athletics Fund. Dr. Z, is always a pleasure. Thank you very much.
I may go hit Provenzano's here pretty soon. You just kind of planted that seed in my ear, I haven't had a good Broccoli Rob, hard roll for a while. They call it the Napoli over there, just for a little side note.
Good place. Maybe you can meet Randall over there one
day.
That's
right. Maybe that's where we'll break some bread.
There you go. For all of us here at the Dr. Z and J-Dub podcast, I'm J-Dub. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time. I think we're supposed to do snaps for poetry.
The snaps. Awesome. Yeah. That's the Soho thing.
That's it.